It's been about 6 months since it started, about 4 months since it ended, and about 2 months since I left the place where it happened. Now is the time for me to post a retrospective on Shanghai's COVID outbreak and long lockdown that defined much of my year 2022. By early March of this year, reports started coming of the increased prevalence of the Omicron variant. Slowly, it started breaking out in more and more communities. And by mid-March, schools had moved online to try to slow down the spread. And while Shanghai resisted the idea of a citywide lockdown, they were carrying out smaller lockdowns of individual buildings and communities. My building was one of those. There was a case discovered there just about a day after online school started, and the building was completely locked down then. Barriers were erected in front of it, and they sent workers in hazmat suits to keep us inside and to help us with our deliveries of our packages and things like that. People started calling these workers dabai, which literally means big white.
At the time, I didn't know the source of this name. The character Baymax from the Disney film Big Hero 6, whom these people dressed in white hazmat suits apparently resembled to some people.
They gave us a COVID test in the middle of the night one day, and they told us that one more clean set of results would mean that we would be able to get out of our building again. But they took days before we got another test. By the time it finally happened, they were testing the entire community, not just our building. They let us out of the building at this point, though the community itself was locked down, so we couldn't get out of the gates. I remember when all the COVID tests came back negative, the gates were reopened, to much general rejoicing among the residents. If only we'd known what was coming next. Less than a week after we got out, we learned that after resisting for a long time, the Shanghai government was going to impose a mass lockdown in 2 phases. First, 4 days in Pudong, which is the area I lived in, and then another 4 days in Puxi, which is the other side of the river. They said there wasn't going to be a citywide lockdown, but even then, a lot of people were skeptical that just 4 days staggered in 2 different parts of the city was really going to be enough to get the cases to come down. And sure enough, when April rolled around and Puxi locked down, Pudong's lockdown didn't end. The citywide lockdown we've been assured wouldn't happen had arrived. And as cases were continuing to increase, it was pretty clear this lockdown wasn't ending anytime soon. For the first over a week, we were told to stay indoors all the time to prevent the spread. If we tried to wander outside, the volunteers would shoo us back in. These were the people whose job it was to ensure the lockdown ran smoothly.
And they were easy to identify with their red uniforms.
I'm told the word volunteers was a bit of a misnomer, as members of the Communist Party were more or less told they needed to do this. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, they kept us from loitering outside, and they also tried to make sure we wouldn't have any need to go outside by bringing our packages straight to our buildings. We mostly went outside only when medical personnel arrived to carry out mass testing, which was multiple times a week. And on days when we didn't get professional testing done,
we were asked to self-test using at-home tests and upload a photo of our results.
After the lockdown had been on for about a week, we had a couple days in which our community was upgraded to a less guarded status, where we could freely wander about the community, though the gates in and out of the community remained barred. Then another positive test cropped up in the community, and we were back to indoor lockdown for a week. This was also a time when some people were having trouble getting food. Many of you no doubt heard about this on international news at the time.
The Shanghai government sometimes gave us some food, but that alone wasn't nearly enough to sustain us.
Fortunately, we never got to the point that we were in any danger of running out of food. Though another thing we were a little worried about was price gouging. My wife spent a good deal of her free time looking online for deals on food. She was quite good at finding enough meat and vegetables to keep us going comfortably. Eventually, the Shanghai government did start to crack down on price gouging, and food did get a bit easier to get.
By late April, our community was once again open for us to walk around in, but not to leave.
In theory, 1 week after that, it should have been possible for the gates to open. But it became pretty clear soon that this more relaxed state with the gates open was purely theoretical. Life just continued on as it was with the gates closed. School remained online, and we continued to order food online. One time we even got a big shipment of Western food for a big group of people in our community. We tested daily, either a rapid test or a professional one. All negatives. After a while I decided I was disappointed that after so many negative tests I hadn't at least won a cookie. We also didn't win release, and this worried me as I needed to get out of Shanghai to move to Ningbo, and more importantly because I had documents to get for my visa transfer to my new employer there.
Signs of reopening began to appear in mid-May, when I was first allowed outside my community for a brief shopping trip.
It was nice to get out, but still no way to deal with my documents, so I still had that to worry about. A few days later, we got another shopping trip. Then, near the end of May, came something different, something bigger. Everyone was being allowed out for 3 hours, and not just to go shopping. The buses were going to be running again. We'd be able to wander through Lingang, though there wouldn't really be time to go anywhere else. We also were told that we would need a COVID test within the past 48 hours to go to pretty much any public place, for example, shopping or public transportation. So, the day before this excursion, I got swabbed, and the next day,
I did indeed wander a park in Lingang, ride a public bus and go shopping, and even got myself a McDonald's cheeseburger to go, just because I hadn't had one in ages.
I suspect this brief outing was a test run for the real deal. Just a few days later, on June the 1st, the gates opened for good, and everyone could go in and out. I spent that day on the phone and online trying to figure out what was open and not.
And then the next day I traveled to the city to get my documents done. Every time I wanted to get on a bus or train or enter a public building, I had to scan my code to show my recent COVID test.
Nonetheless, I was struck at the time by how quickly everything had reopened, with practically everything back to normal.
The one exception was dining. Everything was takeout only.
Otherwise, things were clearly back on. I got my documents done that day, and in a few days they were off to the US for further processing. There were a few more steps in the reopening process, such as when in-person dining did ultimately return, but mostly it was just one big reopening on June the 1st. Some things didn't change, such as regular COVID testing.
One big change between pre-lockdown and post-lockdown Shanghai was the presence of COVID testing booths everywhere.
Since people needed a test within the past 72 hours, they'd increased it from 48. In order to go much of anywhere, the city made sure testing was widely available. Another thing that didn't change is that for most students, in-person school did not return. Those who had exams to take did go back, but otherwise school remained online. I'm told Shanghai did just return to in-person learning for the new 2022 to 2023 school year, but I'm not there anymore. And that kind of leads to the end of my story. The last impact that this whole outbreak in Shanghai had on me was that it delayed my departure from Shanghai. A small outbreak occurred in Pudong, and it meant that I would not be able to enter temporary housing at my new employer in Ningbo for 3 days after my arrival in the latter city. So, we ended up leaving about 2 weeks later than we had originally planned.
Only to still not be able to enter this housing situation and to have to spend our first 3 nights in a hotel.
We also had to register all our details with the authorities and take a COVID test upon arrival because we were coming from Shanghai. We also had more COVID tests to take over the next few days, which the authorities kept calling us to make sure we remembered to do. But we did, and in the end we did make it into our temporary housing and later into permanent housing here in Ningbo. The Shanghai outbreak is now behind me. The biggest takeaway from all this is that China's zero COVID policy isn't going anywhere, at least not right now. And while Shanghai's lockdown is no longer my problem, there will probably be more restrictions that will pop up at some point. Unlike in the West, where getting COVID seems to be a part of life these days, here in China, COVID's not very likely to get you, but COVID restrictions are absolutely a part of life. Who knows, maybe before long I'll be making videos about my experience of COVID restrictions here in Ningbo. And if you want to be here, if and when those are released, this would be a great time to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Hope you enjoyed this little discussion about my experience with the Shanghai outbreak and lockdown. Thanks so much for watching. See you all next time. Bye.